My city is still. If you dig my lingo, you'll know that I feel like ain't no city so gritty, so filled with appeal. I'm off to Permanis, piled on my next meal. Never mind.
Hello, Yinzer Crazy Nation and Steelers Nation. Happy Tuesday to Yins. And it's a good week, obviously, because the Pittsburgh Steelers are still the last unbeaten in the National Football League after that knockdown, drag 'em out fight against the Baltimore Ravens. What else would you expect? I wrote about it in my column yesterday on yinzercrazy.com. Talked about some of the role players stepping up and becoming a bigger piece of this Steelers pie this season. Guys like Alex Highsmith, who had the huge interception. I want to talk about Isaiah Buggs, who made a big fourth down stop on Lamar Jackson late in the game after he kind of got torched early by the Ravens' run game. And a few more, including Jordan Berry, kicked a booming punt to shut up some of the Twitter naysayers, at least momentarily. And Justin Lane, who is number 31 on the Steelers. And I thought that was apropos because this weekend I celebrated my 31st birthday. And I am tired, man. You know you're getting old when you don't even have a sip of alcohol and you feel hungover 2 days into the next week already. So I'm over here looking at anybody over the age of 35 with a whole new appreciation. Not that I didn't previously. I also got told this weekend that I do two things that I didn't realize were inhumane, apparently, because I'm getting absolutely scolded for both of them. One is drinking tap water. I do that all the time. And two, this past weekend was Halloween, and I ate candy corn. And people were like, what? That's a decoration. You don't actually eat that. Both of those things kind of threw me off. Maybe that's why I'm not feeling so hot this week, is because of my tap water and candy corn consumption. But I want to know your feedback on Twitter or any forum, really, where Yinzer Crazy is applicable. Am I a serial killer because I drink tap water and eat candy corn, or am I just a normal human? Or maybe a 5-year-old stuck in a 31-year-old's body? All right, whatever. Anyway, let's get into the Steelers a bit more. It's good to be wrong sometimes, that's for sure. I'll toot my own horn over here. I had the Tennessee Titans last weekend losing to the Steelers 27-24, and we came within 1 point of nailing that exact score. We had them 27-25, and the Steelers, of course, won that game 27-24. We did predict last weekend at Yinzer Crazy that the Ravens would beat the Steelers. The first time we have been wrong all year, but I'm very happy to be wrong, obviously. I thought the chips were stacked against the Steelers, honestly. Check out my pregame write-up at yinzercrazy.com. Leading into that game, kind of talked about how the Ravens were coming off a bye. John Harbaugh's 10-2 following the bye week. They're playing on their field in sloppy conditions. I thought that favored their run game, which we did see. And the desperation that I thought the Ravens would be playing with, given the fact that they'd be 2 games plus out of the AFC North race, trailing the Steelers after a loss. But I guess what I didn't factor in is just this Steelers team is different, man. They have a serious moxie about them, kind of a us against the world mentality right now. I wrote about that in my post-game Monday recap as well. And it's really cool to see. I really honestly believe this is a Super Bowl favorite at this point. It's down to the Steelers and the Chiefs for me, potentially in an AFC Championship game. And if the Steelers do get that 1 seed and force the Ravens and Chiefs to play a divisional matchup, obviously it gives the Steelers a bye entering the playoffs, and it means that they don't have to see the Ravens or Chiefs in the semifinals. They'd probably get a Buffalo Bills type team. I know that's projecting so far into the future in that crystal ball, but how can you not? We're all thinking 7th Lombardi at this point. I know my Yinzers like to say stairway to 7, so I'm with you on that, guys. It's a big week for us on yinzercrazy.com, per usual. Check out our new commercial. It is going viral already. I worked really hard on this over here. I've got my man Jason Kendall in it. I've got my man Ashton Gibbs, former Pitt, All Big East player and current Duquesne assistant coach in it. And we've got our guy Swaggin' You, Ike Taylor, is in the commercial as well, along with Jordan and myself. I am Mike. We are Yinzer Crazy. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot of that commercial aired on your television screen coming up. And we've also got some great podcast guests today that I'm super thrilled about. 2 former Steelers, and they're going to talk about this current version of the Steelers, their former versions of the Steelers that they played on, those teams, and some of the guys that made those teams really special. It's Cortez Allen, former cornerback, 5-year Steeler, and former receiver out of Oregon State, Markus Wheaton. He was part of that dynamic group of receivers the Steelers had for a while, playing with Ben Roethlisberger. So he spills the beans on what it was like to play with Ben. Both dropped some awesome stuff on Coach Tomlin and some of the dudes that they played with on those teams. And I even make a suggestion about making a documentary about some of those teams because the personalities, my goodness, Debo, James Ferrier, Brett Kiesel, Troy Polamalu, Ryan Clark. Are you kidding me? Like, looking back into the Steelers past here and some of those teams with those names and personalities, that documentary is going to be a Yinzer Crazy special. I'm telling you, look out for it in 2021 because that's on the agenda for sure. But for now, I want to get into our interview with Cortez Allen. Reminding you first that YinzerCrazy.com is sponsored by Performance Auto. They're on 1701 Freeport Road in Arnold, PA. Our guys Steve and Matt Mike doing big things out there. Obviously, can give you a tune-up or anything you need car-related right now. We know it's getting cold in the Berg and those tires are getting a little worn. Go check out our guys. They'll fix you up right. All right. Cortez Allen coming right up on the Yinzer Crazy podcast.
This is Ike T, two-time Super Bowl champion. And I think I know better than anybody else. Yins are crazy.
You are locked into the Yinzer Crazy podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today on this Tuesday. We obviously have some good news as the Steelers are still the lone unbeaten in the National Football League, and we have a former Steelers corner, the best player ever to lace them up in the black and gold out of the Citadel, cornerback Cortez Allen joins us here on the podcast. Cortez, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Nothing much, man. Just enjoying this great football we've been, showcasing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy that you're enjoying it, man. I was on your Instagram yesterday, and one of the first things that came to my mind, and it always comes to my mind with former players, is are they still rooting for the boys? And you posted a throwback pic. It looked like you were defending Torrey Smith in a Steelers-Ravens game, and you had the caption, Steelers versus nameless gray faces. Can you elaborate on that?
That was always one of Coach T's, sayings that he would always say, with his concept of the next man up, when you have guys that go down, or people go through injuries or trades or things like that where, things you can't really harbor on, that you have to just be ready to roll. And so we would treat every opponent as just another guy on the road to the Lombardi, and instead of naming them and say, okay, we're playing against Flacco or Torrey Smith as it was in the picture, they were just somebody in the way in a sense. So that game actually was my first. I was actually thrown in the fire. I think Ike went down like the third series with a broken bone in his foot, and boom, I'm in there at corner. And that was my first, real taste of what the Steeler-Raven rivalry was about.
Wow. So our Yinzer Nation and Steeler Nation can get another taste of a Tomlinism. That's something that I'd never heard yet. The nameless gray faces. That's pretty cool. So that's what he would refer to the opponents as, basically.
Nameless gray face. He has a ton of them.
Yeah.
If you ever want... he should probably write a book for, just great sayings, like, selling Urban Outfitters,
we got
from beats.
I love that. We got to work on a little scrapbook of Tomlinisms for sure. We're here with Cortez Allen on the Yinzer Crazy podcast. And Cortez, as I was thinking yesterday, watching a Steelers-Ravens game that almost gave me 7 heart attacks, I was like, from a fan's perspective, this is crazy. You lived it. You played in Steelers-Ravens games. You kind of touched on how the week is leading into that game, but what is it like actually, the physicality when you enter in between the lines?
Man, it's one thing I think that's unique, and I say unique, but I can't really say that honestly because I've only played for Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So my sort of say my experience with other teams, I don't have it. Which I'm extremely fortunate for. I'm extremely blessed to come from such a prestigious organization. But in that organization, like it's less about who you're playing and more about who you're playing for. And and you can see that on the field with the guys today and with the guys on Sunday. Let me say, you can see that kind of remnants of, you know, when I first got there in 2011, or their Super Bowl year in 2010, the 2011 Super Bowl year, where you can just see that family bond, that brotherly unit within the locker room, between the lines. So I think this is just foreshadowing, you know, of what's to come.
It's great to hear that you're still rocking with the Steelers. I know our fans always like to hear former players' perspective because obviously you didn't grow up in Pittsburgh. You were born in San Diego, right?
Yes, sir.
And now you're in South Florida. So, you know, you're somebody obviously who's still tuned into the game yesterday. I know obviously you have some major takeaways. What do you like about this Steelers team, and do you think they're on their path to potentially that 7th Super Bowl, Cortez?
I like the fight. I like the fight that they have. They showed it yesterday, you know, being down 10 points going into the half, and then coming out and showing that grit and that just, you know, just tenacity to not let up and to believe in one another and to keep pushing for it. I posted a picture on my story on Instagram yesterday. Just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we're good. And it seemed like you know, they were, you know, on the same page as far as just fixing the minor breakdowns in offensively and defensively. And I saw that Ben got a chance to, you know, play a little bit his background football and, you know, really have fun out there. And that's what it looked like. It looked like a group of guys just having fun.
Yeah, this year just kind of feels different so far in the Berg, and Cortez Allen chopping it up with that, hitting on that feeling as well. Hey, man, I want to talk about your career a little bit. Obviously, Steeler Nation it always wants to get to know their guys a little bit better. You know, they got to watch you for the better part of 5 years, so I think they know a lot about Cortez Allen. But there's a few things that I want to touch on you know, on this podcast. One is playing for a legend and defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau. A guy, obviously, who, you know, it doesn't need any introduction, as they say, in the game. What are some things that you took from Coach, man? Some life lessons, even?
I'll say in my lifetime, you know, I can, you know, count it, you know, in my head, people that I consider, like, you know, great men in my life. Like, you know, at work, outside of work, you know, in my personal life, just men that you can model yourself after as a person in life. And Coach LeBeau is one of those guys, and I'd say Troy was one of those guys too. Just a great human being. You know, playing for him, like you really got. That's where it started in my eyes, as far as the camaraderie, the unity that we had as a defense. I think it started with him and the way that he treated us and the way that he communicated, you know, what he needed from us, and allowed us to communicate what we needed from him. And I think that was the most beautiful thing about playing for him.
We always saw his serious side, Cortez. Did he have a goofy side too? Did he have some fun with you guys?
Comedian. Every meeting he would have a story for us, or some joke or something to tell us, just to, you know, lighten the room, you know, to get us ready and prepared to, you know, be receptive. So, yeah, and I say the same thing about a number of players on the team, where people may see, you know, Harrison's, you know, serious side, but, you know, he's a funny guy as well.
I love that. That's a true sign of a great leader, somebody who's able to make everybody comfortable first and adapt to each person's personality and create individual relationships with each guy. It's really cool stuff from Cortez Allen about Dick LeBeau. You also play with some legends in Steelers lore, man. You talked about that. You know, guys like Ike Taylor and Troy for a little bit, and even Willie Gay, and you know, before you kind of stepped into their roles. Is there anybody in particular on that team that kind of was the guy who stepped in and showed you the ropes about being a Steeler and what it was like to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Oh man, who do I pick from? I think when I first got there, on defense alone, I think there was at least 10 guys who had two Super Bowls. I think we had Casey Hampton, we had Ferry, we had Foote, we had Troy, we had Ryan, we had Ike, we had Alex, we had so many. We had Debo, we had Woodley, we had Timmons, we had so many just legends, you know, in their own rights, and all willing to, you know, show you the game in the way that they learned it from the people before them. and not a selfish bone in their body when it comes to being together and doing what we had to do to win. But as far as, I would say, the person I looked up to the most, I wanted to model myself after as a professional, I would say it was Ike. I never met anybody with a work ethic like him, and just to be around him, brushes off on you, and you get a little bit of that in you. So I credit him to a lot of the success I had, just the willingness to showing me that how to be a professional, and then older guys other guys like Ryan or Troy who are more in a sense cerebral about it, where how to study and how to be prepared mentally for a game, or Coach Tomlin, with his experience, coaching DBs and stuff like that, and giving his insight about the game. Everyone works together in that organization to be successful, and I think that's the beauty of what you see on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays.
Our guy Swaggin' You, we had Ike Taylor on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And he actually is appearing in our YinzerCrazy.com commercial right now. Cortez, everybody always talks about that Miami team of the U that needed a documentary made about them. The team with Clinton Portis and Ed Reed, and I know those are different years. Jeremy Shockey. I need a documentary on that Steelers defense, man. I think Yinzer Crazy is gonna make that. The Cortez Allen, Ryan Clark, Debo, Troy, Swaggin' You years. Will you be a part of that if we work on that?
Absolutely.
My man, I love to hear that.
Phone call away.
My man. Hey, listen, I'm going to take a fan question, and I think this one was really interesting. This one is from Mike in Brookville, and he mentions that you did an interview where you talked about shadowing Rob Gronkowski recently, Patriots tight end. He wants to know, who are some of the toughest guys you have ever covered or shadowed in the NFL? Is it Gronk? Is he the guy that comes to the top of your list?
Gronk was my first real job shadowing, where coach specifically asked me to follow him around. Mm-hmm. I think I was playing dime at the time. It was my rookie year, I believe. We had a home game when we played the Patriots, and that was I would say, I wouldn't say my most difficult challenge, because being a quarterback and being a tight end, mm-hmm. I'm able to just be quicker than him in certain things to get to a position before him. But his size is what made him such a difficult guy to cover. But we had such a great front seven that all I had to do was disrupt the time, and then I can be successful. But to be honest, I felt like the best talent that I went against were in-house, with Antonio, with some of my early years where I had the chance to go against Hines on the practice squad, and just how savvy he was, and how he was able to really mm-hmm. bring so much character in his routes, where you can get a single route 5 different ways, and just a lot of people like that who were doing things that were so unique and experience that nobody else was doing. So I always pick from in-house when I get that question.
Wow, great stuff from Cortez Allen. We're talking with the former 4th-round pick in 2011, 5-year Steeler. Obviously had some big games in his career. Don't forget about the 2 interceptions that he had against Andy Dalton, that forced fumble against A.J. Green, and I think that was 2012 against the Bengals.
Yeah, that was a good game.
That was one of your favorite games, I'm sure, from memory, man. And, hey, listen,
Absolutely.
You touched on a good segue for us, which is defending some of the guys in-house. I know Markus Wheaton was in-house for a little while. We got him coming up, interviewing on this podcast next. Is he somebody that you've maybe kept in touch with a little bit? And you got any dirt? Something we should ask him?
He too clean to have dirt on. He's such a good dude. I had tremendous respect for Wheat, and our time together in Pittsburgh. I think he's been in Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. I think he just had another child. I think a daughter, but I'm not 100% sure. I think he's into fashion, some arts, some music and arts and things like that. So we're into similar things. So we stay in contact. I couldn't say frequently, but we do stay in contact. He's always, reaches out, or I reach out when, we're ever in each other's vicinity.
We're excited to have him on. Cortez, tell our listeners and our fans a little more about what you're doing now. Is it a clothing brand?
Yes, I have a clothing brand called the Heartbreak Society. You can find our stuff at theheartbreaksociety.com or HBK Society on Instagram or all the platforms. And basically it's kind of like a play on words where we see heartbreak as the doorway to creativity. Kind of like the beauty in your struggles, to say. Our downfalls, our setbacks are usually times where we find that motivation to become something better or something greater. So that's how we look at the concept. And as well, we do a lot of social work where right now we're putting together a project to feed the homeless and for Thanksgiving. And just getting really plugged into the community socially in Miami so that we can, affect change.
Incredible stuff. Cortez Allen, a former Steeler and an all-around great dude. Thanks so much for coming on the Yinzer Crazy Show. Man, let's do it again sometime. What do you say?
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for having me.
Man, Cortez Allen would not spill the beans on our guy, Markus Wheaton. You'll have to keep listening to see if Marcus has any dirt to spill on Cortez Allen coming up. Something tells me he's not going to partake in that. But really cool stuff from Cortez, man. We have to have that documentary made about that Steelers team and all of those personalities. My goodness, when you think about it. Debo, James Harrison, Swaggin' You, Ike Taylor, Troy Polamalu, Casey Hampton, Lawrence Timmons, Brett Kiesel, Big Ben. I mean, the list goes on and on. Future Hall of Famers, all in the same Steelers dynasty in that early, mid-2000s. Takes your breath away, really, when you think about how cool it was that we were able to watch those Steelers teams that we'll be telling our grandkids about. That's for sure. And Cortez Allen and Markus Wheaton will certainly always have some excellent stories from literally inside the lines and inside the locker room to share with you guys, because they're a part of Yinzer Crazy Nation. So Cortez was great. It's time to get to Markus. I'm super stoked about that. Of course, I want to remind you to follow us on social media, and we want to shout out our partners at Performance Auto, 1701 Freeport Road, Arnold, PA. Check them out for all your car part needs. It's getting colder in the Berg. I know those tread on those tires are starting to wear a little bit. You know what I didn't ask Cortez Allen? I should have asked him if he thinks I'm a serial killer because I drink tap water and eat candy corn left and right. That would have been probably a little too far steering off of the train tracks, because there was so much good content he gave us. What a guy. Two former Steelers that came in around the same time and played on this roster under Coach Tomlin. Dick LeBeau, Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator at that time. And as I mentioned, just enough Steelers as to where we're going to get a documentary out of this someday. Cortez Allen and Markus Wheaton. You have my word. And with that said, let's segue into Markus, our guy. And let's hear a little bit about what he's doing post-football life. We even talk about Michael Vick a little bit. Yes, we absolutely do, because this is Yinzer Crazy. I'm excited to bring in another Steeler, guy who is part of the rich history at the wide receiver position, of course. Markus Wheaton joins us on the podcast. Markus, thanks so much for joining us. Where are you at right now, man?
I'm in Chandler, Arizona.
And that's where you live?
That's where I live, yep.
That's awesome, man. So, hey, listen, obviously a lot of people are excited about the Steelers right now. This is an undefeated football team, last one in the NFL. I think the first question on a lot of our fans' mind is going to be, how much are you still keeping up with the NFL landscape, Markus? Are you a Steelers guy? Are you still watching the games? What is that relationship kind of like?
I'm a Steelers fan, man. I'm a Steelers fan. They gave me my shot, so I'm loyal to them.
We just got to make sure, because you never know. Some people grow up, you're an Oregon State guy. You never know where your allegiance may lie post-football life for sure. But that's awesome to hear that you're still a fan of the team. And you, of course, entered a Steelers team back in 2013 that was just full of a ton of personalities and great players, right? Guys like Ike Taylor, Troy, Ben Roethlisberger was, of course, on that team. That list goes on and on. Was there anyone specifically who kind of took you under their wing, Markus, whether it's a Jericho Cotchery type?
That's exactly it. Of course, we had a good-looking receivers room, as the Steelers always do. With Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, Jericho Country, myself, Justin Brown. But Jericho, when I got there, of course, Jericho was the old head of the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
So he was very seasoned, and he knew his way around the football field, around the locker room. And he was the guy that I kind of latched on to, and he kind of showed me the ropes. So I think it's safe to say I owe a lot of what I learned early on in the league to Jericho.
What kind of leader was Jericho, Marcus? Was he a vocal leader, more of a kind of lead by example type guy?
Definitely a little bit of both, right? He's probably the quietest, most vocal guy you ever meet, right? Because he's not gonna raise his voice. He always is soft spoken, but he always has something to say. You get what I'm saying? So,
right.
He was that guy that was always in my ear, and even when he wasn't, I was in his ear asking him questions. But he was always the guy that would take the young guys under his wing, and he stayed in our ears. Even with the vets at the time, with E. Sanders and AB, he was always, of course, coaching them up too. So he was a little bit of both.
We're chopping it up with former Steelers wide receiver Markus Wheaton on the Yinzer Crazy Show. Marcus, obviously every Steelers conversation in 2020 is circulated around Ben Roethlisberger. This is a guy who has the team undefeated. Obviously, the ageless wonder at this point, coming off of his elbow surgery. So man, I want to know about your relationship with him. Is what kind of quarterback and mentor was he for you when you were on this team?
I think we hit it off, man. We hit it off early. As soon as I got in, I feel like he talked to me similar to what Jericho did, right? And he kind of took me under his wing and tried to show me a couple things early to keep me around, to get me going, to make me better. And he continued to do that while I was there. And I think that's why he has the success that he has, is because of his relationships that he tries to build with his receivers. He takes the time. He takes the time to nurture those relationships when they need to be nurtured. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's no surprise that he has the success that he's having, that he's still having that success, especially coming off of an injury, man. And I feel like coming off of an injury, you always are extra driven. You got something to prove even more. So it makes sense. It makes sense to see him doing what he's doing.
Well, I'm interested to get your perspective on that, Marcus. It's a good segue. You had some really solid years with the Steelers. 2014, 53 grabs, and in 2015, you had those 5 touchdowns and almost 800 yards. But the year after, you did suffer a pretty serious shoulder injury, and talk about kind of trying to overcome that and regain some of your football strength, etc., and how challenging that must have been.
It's tough. It's tough, especially when you're getting a good rhythm, right, with your team, with your coaches, with your quarterback, and then of course suffering an injury and that can derail you a little bit. But that's kind of what happened with me. Went down with the shoulder injury. Tried to fight back from it without the surgery. It wasn't working, so ended up going ahead and getting the surgery. And after I got the surgery, tried to bounce back in Chicago. Suffered a couple other injuries. Mentally, I took a beating, man. It's tough. It was tough for me. I can't speak for everybody else. It was tough for me being on a new team, not having the respect that you have at your previous team, right? But then trying to come off this injury and prove to guys that you can still ball. So I took a beating, beat myself up mentally, going through that whole process. Felt like I climbed up out of it, but got hit with another injury, and we know where that led. So, but currently no regrets. I'm at home. I have 4 kids. I have my wife. We're doing great. So everything worked out as it should have.
Beautiful, man. Hey, I know Steeler Nation certainly knows the talent you have, and we're big fans of you and of your work when you were playing for the Black and Gold, of course. You didn't just have one noteworthy quarterback, Marcus. You played also with a guy named Mike Vick, Mr. Madden cover himself. And, dude, one of my favorite plays as a lifelong Steeler fan, of course, you know what I'm going to talk about, Monday night, that win out in San Diego against the Chargers, the 72-yard touchdown from Mike Vick. Talk to me about it, dude. Tell our fans. I mean, what is that the play that's most talked about? Like when you're talking about Markus Wheaton's career with fans, and if you're sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner table and somebody brings up football.
It's not the most talked about, but it definitely comes up every time. It definitely comes up every time. I think my generation, we called him Mike. We called him Uncle Mike in the locker room, but I feel like our generation looked up to Michael Vick, right? We grew up watching him do his thing on the field. So, one, getting the opportunity to play with him was insane. 2, of course, doing something legendary with him in completing that big ball to ultimately lead us to a huge win on the road in San Diego is something that I would never forget. I still have that ball. I got it signed by Mike. Got to hang it up in my movie room. So that's definitely a huge play in my career.
That is just awesome, man. That is really, really cool stuff. Hey, we just talked to Cortez Allen, and you guys kind of were both youngsters on a similar Steelers team, looking to establish your own identities with, as I mentioned earlier, some big names, the likes of Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown, who was still young, relatively young at the time. But what kind of vibe, I guess, was it like entering as a youngster on a team with just so many future Hall of Famers, really?
Honestly, I can't imagine it being much different anywhere else, right? And I say that as a kid coming out of college, entering into the league with a bunch of big names, right? A bunch of guys you watch on TV, a bunch of guys you looked up to. You get what I'm saying? So, me being in that situation, I couldn't imagine it being much different elsewhere, right? Where there's also big names and guys that you look up to. So I can't really speak on the differences, but when I came in, right, I'm glued to these guys because I see the success that they have, and I wanted it, right? I wanted to learn what they were doing. I wanted to learn what not to do. I wanted to put up the numbers that they were putting up and even surpass that. So I looked up to those guys, and I studied them. I studied them really hard, and I think that it ultimately helped me on the back end.
We've got Markus Wheaton here on the Yinzer Crazy podcast. Marcus, we also had to dig deep a little bit. We asked Cortez, we said, man, do you have any dirt on Marcus? We're about to talk to him. And dude, this is a direct quote. He said, he is too clean. That's what he said. He is too clean. He said Marcus is kind of like me. He's into art and fashion, but there is no dirt on him because he's too clean. So listen, man, because we don't have any dirt, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about what you're doing in your personal life right now in Arizona. I'm sure you have some hobbies, obviously, outside of football. It's great to hear you have a beautiful, strong family out there as well.
I appreciate that compliment too, Tez. But right now I'm into real estate. I purchase and sell apartment buildings. Most of my time is spent at home with the family. I like to bowl. I like to watch movies. Ultimately, like to spend time with my family, whatever that is doing. But I'm pretty simple, man. I'm enjoying life now that I'm retired from football. Right? There's no real struggle days. There's no real struggle days. There's no painful days. You know, there's no real early days. Everything is pretty smooth and easy nowadays. So just enjoying the family, enjoying the kids, trying to get them on track and keep them on track, and continue to grow, mentally.
Do you have a fantasy football team? I've always been curious about former players.
I do.
I love that. Who do you have?
I don't even know if I want to talk about it.
All right, no, you don't have to, but that's cool. You answered the first part. That is awesome. You know what? I haven't asked any.
I got Deontay Johnson on there.
I love that. So you're repping some Pittsburgh blood on that fantasy football team and some lineage at the receiver position.
Yeah, he had a couple good days for me. We struggling right now. You know what I'm saying? I might need to give him a call in a week or two. You know what I'm saying? If this continues, I need to call Ben or somebody. But,
I love it.
I'm struggling, man. It's in fantasy. I gotta bounce back.
Well, it's still a cool distraction. You know what? I don't know what compelled me to ask that. I haven't asked any. We've had Ike Taylor, Cortez, Sammy Coates. I haven't asked anybody that yet, but it just came to my mind. I was like, you know what? I'm curious if these guys are playing, but that's really cool. And you certainly do have an advantage if you did get on the phone with Ben and say, hey, man, throw a couple to Deontay. Not that would ever happen. Hey, dude, congrats on all your success, man, professionally and all the things post-football life that you're doing out there in Arizona. You're obviously always an honorary Yinzer and Pittsburgher in our minds, man, and I'm sure our fans will be stoked to hear from you and that you're doing well.
My man, I appreciate the love, for real.
For real, man, no problem. Let's do it again sometime, all right, Marcus? Appreciate you.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
That was great stuff from Markus Wheaton. Yeah, I don't know what compelled me to ask that fantasy football question, but I think that's one that I'm going to make a consistent part of these athlete interviews moving forward because I was super curious. I think when we started talking about Mike Vick, it had my mind racing about, athletes supporting other athletes, whether it's Madden, through fantasy football, things of that nature. And it's hilarious to hear that Markus Wheaton is a fantasy football manager. It sounds like his team isn't doing so hot, but he's got Deontay Johnson on his team. That obviously is a positive whenever Deontay's in the lineup. He's putting up big stats. Hey, man, another sweet episode of the Yinzer Crazy podcast. Thanks, guys, so much for all the support and the love. We're going to keep growing this brand. Like I said, check out our commercial. We got my guy Ike Swaggin' You Taylor supporting Yinzer Crazy left and right out here. And a lot of big things on the way still. Make sure you follow us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Yinzer Crazy Show, Instagram Yinzer_crazy, and then on Facebook you can just search our Yinzer Crazy groups. And make sure you join and be a part of this crazy YC nation that we're building over here. We love to get the fans engaged in our content directly through these athletes, which is what we do. You heard it with Cortez Allen, with taking the question from Michael in Brookville, and these athletes and former athletes love still being embraced by Pittsburghers. And if you didn't feel that love from Markus Wheaton directly, then I don't know what's wrong with you, because I certainly did. So we're going to keep rolling out some awesome content here. Our crazy Yinzers, we love you so much. As always, for my man JY, who couldn't make it today, he's taking care of his puppy, which cannot be an easy task. I am Mike. Yins, stay crazy. Peace.
You'll know that I feel like ain't no city so gritty, so filled with appeal. I'm off to Permanis, piled on my next meal. Never mind New Hampshire, got my own Washington Mount. Got 3 Jordan Rivers, but who's keeping count? Got the world's first Ferris, got the world's famous salt. Take me out to the ball game, no hesitation, no ball. Got Denny and Keaton, Warholm and Rogers, Fred Film Night of the Living, and Dawn of the Dead. Made the first Arnold Palmer, down is so sweet. Only 6-time winner, Super Bowl repeat. Yeah, the city of schools, a city with class. Long before I found trees, we were making our glass. Don't mess with us, so curtain, put your flat on your back. You can visit other cities, but none will surpass. Yeah, none will surpass. It ain't JY's flow without tight rhymes. It ain't a Pittsburgher without the fries from the nation's heartland, like moms out